What about the
Well, you're at the right fundraiser based on the answer, so.
What about the non-death penalty cases? A lot of the issues you have discussed are present in the non-death penalty cases. Isn't it important to acknowledge that rather than pat ourselves on the back for passing the death penalty legislation?
Well, the answer to that is yes. I mean, that's a fair point. There is something about capital cases, especially if they're the right cases, meaning that the crimes are really heinous, that very often dramatically shifts the burden of proof against defendants. Jurors are just reluctant to let anybody go if the case is bad enough. But aside from that phenomenon, which probably exists to some extent whenever there's a violent crime, a lot of the problems are the same. The problems of eyewitnesses, which we haven't talked about tonight, but there was another revelation to me when I was an assistant U.S. attorney. I didn't think that people made mistakes in eyewitness testimony. As a matter of fact, I have serious questions now whether we even ought to admit eyewitness testimony in court without some effort to verify it. Because people, it turns out, are not used to witnessing crimes. They're literally in shock, and their perceptual systems fail. That's a problem across the board. So is the false confession problem. So are some of the resource problems in our criminal justice system. The people in the public defender's office, Rita Fry, I saw her earlier tonight, struggle to do everything they can for every client. But Rita would be the first to tell you they do not have enough time to do the job that they would like to do for every client. These are problems that pervade the entire criminal justice system. And if you go down to 26th Street, and I encourage everybody here who's never done it to do it, you will see wholesale justice being practiced, and it's not because there are not good and conscientious people on both sides, but they are shoving those cases through that system as fast as they can. People are being urged to plead guilty to get better deals, and that's another thing. The innocent pleading guilty because of the threat of much harsher sentences.
I'm going to ask just one or two more quick questions, and then we will conclude. John, have you had any contact with Deborah Sue Carter's family since The Innocent Man was published? And if so, what has been their reaction to the book?
Debbie Carter was the young, very cute waitress who was murdered on December the 7th of 82, and she was obviously the victim that Ron Williamson was wrongfully convicted of killing. As I researched the book, I actually met her mother and spent time with her mother. And by then, Ron Williamson and another man had been tried, convicted, sentenced, and served 12 years, and both had been exonerated by DNA evidence. And then the real killer, who was the last person seen alive with her daughter the night of the murder, had been convicted 20 years after he killed her, and he was on death row. So she'd been really chewed up by the system. I mean, the whole family had just been wiped out by bad prosecutions. And she was very anxious to talk, and she wanted her story told, and we became really, really close buddies. And a year ago when the book was published, we threw a big party in Oklahoma, and I invited all the folks I'd met along the way, all those who wanted to come. And for the first time, we had Ron Williamson's sisters, both of them, and the victim's mother and family. And the last time in the same room, hugging and kissing and taking pictures. And the last time they'd seen each other had been in the courtroom when they sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, literally hating each other over a bad conviction. And it was kind of nice to bring them all together and have some closure to it.
And that was the first time they had seen each other outside of...
First time they'd seen each other, and everybody was hugging and everybody was crying. And, the truth had finally been told.
one last question. Illinois has more than 100 people serving life sentences for crimes committed when they were younger than 18. Do you think we should abolish the sentence of life without parole for juveniles?
Can I pass on that? Here's one of the great problems. And it's another of those sort of tough love issues. One of the arguments that people make in favor of capital punishment is that it's the only way you can be sure that justice is done. And, every time we change sentencing laws, it stirs up public outrage about the fact that we've promised victim families, that these people are going to be gone forever, and then we turn around and say, oh, whoops, we didn't really mean that. I don't know what I think about that, Cornelia. I am very troubled about having owned 3 teenagers and having known the way they behave. I am very, very troubled about the idea of holding a person to account for the rest of his, or very rarely her, life because of behavior at such a tender age. And my visceral reaction is against it, but I recognize what the arguments against would be.
It's very tough because there are some crimes that committed by 16, 17-year-old people that defy description. They're just as brutal as those committed by people who are 30 years old.
Sometimes more brutal.
Sometimes more brutal. And, my point is I'm in favor of stopping capital punishment. At the same time, like you talked about with Brisbane, put those people away in a supermax. Get the violent people out of where they belong. And I've been to enough prisons and enough death rows to say, thank God for prisons, okay? Because there's some people there that, need to be there. But if we're going to say, let's don't kill them, let's put them away forever, okay? I'm not sure that you can say, if you're under 18, you don't deserve that when you look at some of the crimes. Yeah. I don't know how low you go, and that's where we start squirming, okay? But there are some unbelievable crimes committed by those people.
The most interesting problem is the one that has not been talked about very much, which is the aging of our prison population. As we keep all these people in prison for their entire lives, the state is going to be forced to pay their medical bills. And they, of course, will multiply. And we're beginning to move into the era where people are going to begin to realize that this life in prison without parole is a very expensive proposition when you take somebody who's basically aged and toothless and is still holding them in prison because they're infirm.
Well, thank you both so much for being here tonight, and maybe we can convince you with a couple glasses of wine to stay and put the disco lights on and perform a number. You too, John.
The Illinois Channel's televised coverage of this program is made possible by the law firm Reed Smith. You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. If you have any comments or questions on our programming, please email us at illinoischannel@aol.com. Or if you have any questions about the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.